Financial markets in turmoil.
What are the root causes of the financial crisis?
The dollar losing value.
Heading for its biggest loss in nearly 3 decades.
Will Social Security even be there?
I don't know.
Buy or rent?
That's a very good question.
Interest rates.
I'm not so sure.
Where do you put your money?
I don't know.
Welcome to the show that answers your questions. This is Follow the Money Weekly with your host, economist, and best-selling author.
Here's Jerry
welcome
Robinson.
to this week's edition of Follow the Money Weekly. So glad that you're joining us all around the world. I hope you had a good turkey day. We sure did. Lots of turkey, too much turkey. And now we're on the slide into the final part of the year. Can you believe it's almost 2015? 2015? What? I can't even get my head around that. 2015. How time is just flying, I tell you. It's going fast. And here we are. We're almost at the very end of the year. And what do we have waiting for us but a big, nice 4 weeks of lots of consumption? Black Friday is already over. Then there was Small Business Saturday, Good Shopping Sunday, and then Cyber Monday. And, of course, looking at the weekend overall, sales were down at about, I think it was about 11%. But that's because the sales are everywhere, right? Everybody's going out and buying before Thanksgiving. They're not waiting until the holidays. Well, on this week's program, we're taking kind of a little bit of a break. We're going to be going into our archive and taking a look at one of the interviews that I did. It's been about a year ago. It was an interview that I did just prior to the Prophecy Conference in Orlando, Florida last year, what they call the Prophecy Summit. By Prophecy in the News. I speak for them every year. I'll be there also in 2015 speaking and on several different topics. But this interview that I'm going to play you is rather interesting because many of you who listen to this program, you don't hear me talk a whole lot about my faith. It's not something I like to wear on my sleeve. It's something that I certainly am very proud of. I'm a longtime Bible researcher. I love teaching the Bible. I love reading the Bible. But again, when it comes to all of that on this program, this is mainly about investing and income. But in this interview you're going to hear, you'll hear some of my spiritual beliefs about the economy, which I think some of you might find instructive or maybe beneficial. And then after that, we'll be joined by Tom Cloud. He'll be here with an update for all of our precious metals investors. So let's go ahead and head over now to that interview. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
It's easy for most of us to say that we're not really concerned about money until the day comes when we suddenly find ourselves without any. Our guest is an economist, an investor, a serial entrepreneur, best-selling author who hosts a 1-hour weekly radio program entitled Follow the Money Weekly. His book, a bestseller entitled Bankruptcy of Our Nation, 21 Income Streams, Pace Investing, and more. It's our pleasure to welcome to the Prophecy Summit at Pikes Peak, Jerry Robinson.
Hey,
Jerry,
great to be
welcome.
here. Thank you.
This is a little bit of an interesting topic for a prophecy summit. Is this something that you find yourself doing? Do you talk prophecy, or how does your field of expertise relate to the general theme of the topic here?
I was really impressed with Gary Stearman and the folks here at Prophecy in the News for bringing an economic insight to the conference. It seems as if in the past, ethereal topics have been approached and discussed.
Sure.
But oftentimes the practical is sometimes left out. And so I think economics plays a major role in the book of Revelation. It plays a major role in prophecy. So I believe that that this is very fitting. I believe money, in fact, is in many ways one of the ultimate deceivers of mankind, the love of money, of course, the root of all evil. Mm-hmm. But I believe that money itself has become such a chief competitor for mankind's heart. It becomes oftentimes our sole ambition. So having a proper view of money, I believe, is vital for being prepared for the last days.
So what would that proper view? How do we prioritize it correctly?
Probably understanding that the entire monetary system that we live in is debt-based.
Yeah.
Also understanding that the powers that be do not have our best interests at heart. Understanding that money controls politicians. Understanding that money controls the media, corporate-controlled media. Understanding that much of what we hear is not an actual news report on the news, but instead it's just a PR release put out by a corporation designed to form and fashion our brains. So I believe economics, called the dismal science, helps us to basically follow the money. What really is happening. And when we scratch beneath the surface, we discover all kinds of terrible things. Terrible things in the fact that men tend to screw things up historically. We have 6,000 years. We have 6,000 years of proof that man can't rule himself.
Yeah.
And yet, for some reason, we continue to believe that we can rule ourselves.
Well, that's my big problem with the New Age belief. I mean, every day in every way we're getting better and better. Well, no, we're not. The only thing we might be getting more efficient at is eliminating our fellow man. You mentioned the economy of the United States is debt-based. Our basic understanding for those of us who studied economics at all, and I've got a BA in economics, is that we're supposed to be able to make a profit. A capitalist system, you invest some capital, you build a product or provide a service, and then you get to keep the profit. Isn't that how our economy works?
It is. The problem is what the profits are made of. They're made of debt. The entire monetary system itself is backed up by the full faith and credit of a bankrupt federal government. The government itself owes approximately $17 trillion due to the...
That's only if you use the accounting methods that would...
Due to the national debt, yeah.
Yeah, that's only through accounting methods that would get most corporate accountants thrown in jail.
Right. But if you go ahead and include everything, including the unfunded obligations out to 2040, for example, you come up with $124 trillion.
Right.
So you have this massive amount of money that's owed, and yet you have zero money in savings to pay for it. And in fact, the federal government doesn't owe the money. We owe the money. And so in many ways, our hope of ever becoming debt-free in a debt-based monetary system is absolutely positively impossible. Therefore, it requires a shift in our minds to help us understand that money itself is actually being used by the most corrupt institutions of the world to control us. And coming to an understanding of that, I believe, A, provides not only financial liberty, but it also provides spiritual liberty. The other thing that we also find is that our personal liberty is under attack because of the greed and because of the lust for power. And so our ministry is really focused upon financial liberty, spiritual liberty, personal liberty. Liberty, freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So we firmly take that to be the truth, and that's what we preach.
So how do we achieve this, financial liberty and then spiritual liberty by changing the way we view money?
Well, let's just take, for example, the U.S. economy. Right now, the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency. Many people don't understand that how it became the world reserve currency was because it was backed by gold. That happened back in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement. That broke down in 1971, officially, whenever Nixon took us off the gold standard. But 2 years later, Kissinger and Nixon put us back on the oil standard. In essence, they talked to Saudi Arabia, and they said, why don't you basically take all the oil that comes up out of the ground and charge dollars for it only? And if you do, we'll provide you with weapons. We'll provide you with military support. We'll protect you from big bad Israel, who is your enemy. We'll protect you. And all you have to do is price your oil in dollars. Well, by the 1975 came around, OPEC nations, Iran, Iraq, all of these nations wanted in. They said, hey, we want weapons too. We want protection from Israel too. And the U.S. said, no problem. All you got to do is price your oil in dollars. That created a worldwide demand. Countries like Japan, who are resource poor, they had to come up with dollars in order to purchase oil. Okay, so it creates a massive demand for dollars. Exactly what the gold standard had done. Now, that system is breaking down. Iraq, for example, in 2000, decided to move to the euro. We said we wanted to go and liberate them from terror. We went in and we reinstituted the petrodollar system after they had changed it to the petro-euro system. Libya said, let's move our oil sales to gold. Let's not use the U.S. dollar. I think I remember Gaddafi in a rat hole somewhere, and they had his head, basically. Then, of course, Iran, we're constantly hearing how Iran wants to smoke out Israel. Iran wants to kill Israel. They hate the Jews and all of this. But we also aren't hearing the fact that they have moved away from the U.S. dollar. It's the same demonization we saw of Iraq. It's the same demonization we saw of Libya. It's the same demonization we've seen of all of these axis of evil. Now, someone may say, and this is an example of liberty. This is an example of liberty. Someone may say, but Iran needs to be taken out. We've got to deal with them, right? Especially in the prophecy circle. That's the belief, I think, the prevailing belief. And the question becomes this. Let's take a look at one of our best friends in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. If you convert to Christianity, you have 3 days to repent, or you're going to be beheaded. In Saudi Arabia, there is no freedom of press. There is no freedom of religion. There is no freedom of speech. There is no democracy, and they hate democracy. There is no love of Israel. They hate Israel. There is no disdain for nuclear weapons. 2011, 2012, 2013 New York Times shows us that they're trying to get nuclear weapons. So pray tell me the difference between Saudi Arabia, who is our best friend in the Arab Middle East, and Iran. Well, Iran's a democracy, maybe just in name only, but at least they have tried to cling to democracy. So the U.S. in many ways is a very deceiving empire in the fact that it pervades the media with all kinds of images and demonizes the people that it wants to demonize. And then people like you and me, we walk around and regurgitate what we hear in the media, not based upon fact, but based upon what they want us to think. If you want to deal with the Middle East, deal with all of it. Don't just pick on certain countries that choose not to take your dollar. By the way, Saudi Arabians use our dollar. We love the Saudi Arabians.
But then they turn around and they buy weaponry from the military-industrial complex here in the United States, which then amounts to
buy
essentially
our bonds. Exactly.
High oil prices going back to the 1973
absolutely.
agreement becomes a wealth transfer, an involuntary transfer of wealth from American taxpayers through the petro sheikdoms back to American military suppliers.
And even into the bond market. They actually, that petrodollar recycling, they get the dollars and then they place it back into J.P. Morgan, they place it back into these banksters that run America. So it's a real convenient thing, I think, that many Christians have been co-opted by the mainstream media. They've been co-opted by, many times, Washington to have a desire to kill and maim Iranians. But they often don't realize why. Why do we want to do that? We want to do that because of the petro-euro system that they're using. So, for example, next week the Congress will be passing a bill, no doubt they've already got enough support for it, to cut off all of Iran's oil exports. Now, I'm no friend of Iran, but I'm also no friend of Saudi Arabia. And it's unfortunate that America is, especially when you consider that 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 did not come from Iraq. They did not come from Afghanistan. They did not come from Iran. They came from Saudi Arabia. So it seems to be a very backwards kind of world that we're in. And when we simply believe what the media tells us, I believe we are actually operating in great deception.
About the time that Libya was about to be liberated, there were some reports that had come out through not the most widely distributed mainstream news sources, but there were some reports that were that indicated that Colonel Gaddafi was negotiating with the Chinese to bring them into some exploration agreements with the country there. Coincidence, I'm sure. Did you attach any significance to the fact that the very first act of the rebels, once they liberated Libya, was set up a central bank?
No, not at all. No, that's how these guys work. The very first act in Iraq was the same thing, to move off of the petro-euro system back to the petrodollar system. All of the oil being pumped out of Iraq right now is based on dollars. It wasn't until we invaded.
So then,
and let me explain why that's important, because many people who are watching this maybe say, well, what does that matter? Who cares what currency they use? Well, the Federal Reserve is printing $1 trillion a year. They're printing $85 billion a month. They need a permission slip to print that money. You can't have a permission slip to print money if you don't have a global demand for the money. Mm-hmm. And if you allow one actor in the Middle East to violate the petrodollar system and not use your dollar, then what prevents another one from doing the same thing, and then another one? Then you have a domino effect. Mm-hmm. This is what U.S. is trying to do in the Middle East. They're not trying to solve the Middle East. I don't believe that what we're seeing in the United States is a planned destruction, as many people believe. Many people take a look at the economy in the United States and say, well, Obama is trying to destroy the economy. I think it's quite the opposite. I think that what they're trying to do is they're trying to hold this unbelievable, huge empire with 900 military bases, and it's just spread out all over the world. They're trying to hold this thing together, and they can't. And it's breaking down before their eyes. And so they're going to resort to war. This is exactly what they always do. China and Russia are really our main enemies. Syria and Iraq, or in Iran, the proxy wars that we fight to get to them.
Okay. How do we benefit, or how do the banksters and their allies in the military-industrial complex then benefit from taking the war to Syria and Iran?
Well, Syria is a terrible tragedy. Basically, the latest report that's out shows that nearly 100,000 souls have been killed.
Yeah.
Now, I think in the West, we like to think in our minds that those are rogue, Syrian army folks who are wearing fatigues and they have weapons. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Unfortunately, it's women. Unfortunately, it's children. Unfortunately, it's infants. Unfortunately, it's many people that you and I would say, how in the world can we see those people killed?
Yeah.
The problem is that the United States has not only facilitated these deaths, but they've also provided financing. And on top of it now, they're providing weapons. And they're not providing weapons to just a rebel group that's popped up in Syria. They're providing weapons to Al-Qaeda. They're providing weapons and financing to the Al-Nusra Front, which is part of Al-Qaeda. And it makes you wonder, imagine if Canada, for example, got really mad at us and they said, we're going to send Al-Qaeda folks down to Chicago and we're going to give them military arms and financing because we really think Chicago needs to change its ways.
Yeah.
I think
people dying on the streets every weekend in Chicago.
Yeah, we need to fix it. We need to fix it.
Right.
And, we can't have this next to us. We got to fix this. I think most Americans would be irate.
Sure.
Now, we have the equivalent of almost 2 9/11s occurring in Syria every single month. And that money is coming from us. Therefore, the blood is on our hands. We must stop this military aggression that we're showing in the Middle East. And we have to understand that it's motivated by economics. It's not motivated by some sort of spiritual guidance that we want to protect Israel. Israel can protect herself. She has more nuclear weapons than the entire Middle East combined. We know this to be fact. She can protect herself, and she will protect herself. We know that. She won't hesitate to protect herself. But we have vested interest over there. We have national interest over there. And we need to get ourselves out of that area.
Well, let's step back and bring this closer to home again. How does our understanding as Christians, looking at this situation, understanding that the banksters, the military-industrial complex or military intelligence complex, whatever you want to call it, has a vested interest in taking our money and applying it in ways that we don't want it applied? What do we do about it? How do we provide for our families knowing that we're part of this system?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, because what happens to many people is they find themselves on the Titanic. They see that we have this $124 trillion national debt when you add everything in. They see the fact that we don't have any money to pay for things. They see that we're all spread out across the globe. They see these atrocities that are going on around the world in their name, and they say, what can we possibly do about this? Imagine you're on the Titanic. This is kind of what people feel like. They're sailing along, they hit the iceberg. What many people have opted to do, and we've seen this with the Tea Party, and we've seen this with other types of groups, they want blood. The ship is sinking, and they want to find out who was driving the boat so they can go up there and spend their remaining hours of their life beating him to a bloody pulp.
Sure.
Right? They want revenge. Well, unfortunately, that's not a wise use of time. Instead, what we need to be doing is hopping into a lifeboat getting our family in that lifeboat, getting our friends and loved ones in that lifeboat, and getting the heck out of Dodge. The Titanic is sinking. The way we do that is first of all, we gain liberty in our minds and understand that the mainstream media, doesn't matter if you're watching CNN or Fox News, there is no difference. They're all owned by corporations. And we realize that these corporations have one thing in mind, and that's profits.
Yeah.
So we extract ourselves from that, and we begin to realize that we have to begin to take action on the part of our family. We have created so many different things on our website. We have over 1,000 articles on our website, ftmdaily.com, tons of free materials on how to break free. But I mean, just to give you a couple examples, we have over 22 income streams that people can create both now and in retirement. The average person has 2. We show 22 different income streams you can have. Many people have no idea how to invest. We provided great investing resources on there. We teach something called PACE. Precious metals, agriculture, commodities, and energy. These are 4 areas that outperform in times of crisis. So we have the PACE investment portfolio up on the website, and it's also in our book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation. We also talk about the importance to diversify using gold and silver with our savings and not being over-leveraged in U.S. dollar-denominated assets. Most people have almost all of their money in U.S. dollars.
Yeah.
There could be a banking holiday. There could be something along these lines, and that stuff gets spooky. Sometimes people get really bent out of shape and they start coming up with all this conjecture. But the truth is that a banking holiday has occurred before in the past, and it could happen again. And the way that the United States would probably stage this, and they will stage it, they won't hesitate to stage anything. What they would likely do is they would probably have some sort of cyber attack. Maybe China commits a cyber attack against us, and they have to close the banks. So they close the banks, and then that happens on a Friday afternoon, conveniently. And then they reopen them on Monday, and you're more than welcome to come to the bank. You just can't get all your money out. You can get $500 out. So it's important, I think, to have an exit plan before you need to exit. If you don't necessarily need it, then fine. And I think that one more thing along these lines, many people probably listening to this broadcast approach Bible prophecy from a pre-trib viewpoint. I think that's probably a given. And that seems to be the prevailing
at
type.
this conference anyway. Sure.
Yeah. But I would say that what if we're wrong? What if we're wrong about that? I think it probably is wise to use the old adage, to prepare as if he's coming today,
live as though
he's coming today,
right?
But prepare as if he's not. And I think it's the same way with this. We should probably not think that we're just going to zip out of here before any problems occur. We really need to take our finances seriously. These things require thought. They require us to really sit down with our families and make a plan. And we provide all the materials that people need to do that on our website and in our book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation.
Again, PACE investing, the sectors that you mentioned, pretty much recession-proof? Precious metals, agriculture, commodities,
yeah,
energy.
I mean, they certainly go up and down. Even in times of recession, certainly they go down. But I think overall, these are areas that outperform in a time of hyperinflation or in a time of great economic crisis. And precious metals, for example, you want to own the physical metal. You want to have that in your possession. When it comes to agriculture, many people have done very well with farmland. Farmland's been something great. You buy the farmland, you rent it out to a farmer.
Yeah, there have been stories, in fact, in recent years of investors going up and buying up farmland in places like South America over some very well-known aquifers down there, and in Africa, buying farmland and holding
because the farmland in the United States has become so expensive, they have to go offshore. But I think the farmland's kind of becoming a bubble now, so maybe a better way to play it would be a direct play on food. Maybe using ETFs or stocks and companies that we've done very well with food stocks. Food stocks have just been doing great. Commodities, things like steel and copper. You can play these, but energy, I think, is another bright spot.
Yeah.
There's certainly ways to play that. Obviously, people with money can go out and buy an oil well and then get royalties.
Yeah.
But the average person can only buy ExxonMobil or Chevron or something like that, or maybe they can get involved, maybe in some sort of type of MLP, like a master limited partnership, which is a very high dividend paying type of energy stock. That throws off a lot of income. So these are the type of ideas I think that most people would benefit from. And I think the other thing is the idea of multiple streams of income. It's so vital. When you read about Abraham, for example, he was rich in gold, he was rich in silver, he was rich in cattle, he was rich in slaves. He was a business owner. I mean, that's what we would call him now. And these are the things that I think many people need to be thinking about. How can I create multiple streams of income? Many are very dependent upon one stream of income, maybe two. Yeah.
Just as a bit of a rabbit trail, and this is just my own personal curiosity, living in east central Illinois, the area of Illinois south of where I live, which was kind of eye-opening to me because I grew up in Chicago. When you grow up in Chicago, you think nothing happens in Illinois south of Interstate 80, Joliet, as I've been reminded repeatedly by the fellows that I meet down in places like Marion and Mount Vernon, Illinois.
Right.
The words oil and boom are being used in the same sentence in those places in southeastern Illinois, places where they've been drilling for 100 years, but new technology is opening up new shale plays that were not available 100 years ago. And there are other places across the country where this is happening, North Dakota in particular. Do these present any opportunities to the average investor?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been definitely great plays on these areas down in Texas, even in Arkansas. There's the Fayetteville shale down there, and then of course you have the big one up in North Dakota,
the Bakken,
the Bakken fields. Yeah, these are obviously very, very good. The United States is very well entrenched into an oil-based infrastructure, and although shale can be converted into oil very easily, and I say very easily, relatively speaking, but it's a much different process. It's much easier to buy it from the Saudis than it is to have to extract it and do it ourselves. It's more costly.
Right.
So I think that that there's this kind of inertia in the United States to actually do something here in our own domestic oil production to eliminate the need for foreign oil. Unfortunately, based on all the studies I've seen, and I know that there's a lot of different studies out there, when we did a big study on this for our book, the United States, we don't have the type of setup that many people would think would allow us to move to a totally great independence from foreign oil. We do have the natural gas to pull it off. We don't have the oil to do it. And many people would disagree with that. They would say, look at this and look at that and look at this. But what they often fail to consider are, A, the absolute cost of extracting it.
Right.
B, the amount of water and other types of energy that are required. There's something called ERREI in the oil area. It's called energy return on energy invested. And at some point, it takes you more than a barrel of oil to pull a barrel of oil out of the ground. And when you reach that point or you even get close to it, guys throw their hands in the air and say, call Saudi Arabia and tell them to send more oil.
Yeah.
So I would say that, yes, it provides opportunities, but they are going to be short-term. The long-term is going to have to be natural gas.
Okay. Just a point of curiosity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
One of your presentations here at the Prophecy Summit is titled Uncovering the Mystery of the Federal Reserve Bank. What is mysterious about the Federal Reserve, and what should we Americans know about it?
Well, the Federal Reserve Bank is a fraud. It was created in 1913 through an act of Congress. Many people who don't know the story should read a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island,
right?
Yeah, by G. Edward Griffin. We've had him on our program, several times.
I had the opportunity to interview him too.
Yeah, he's a great interview.
Yes.
Yeah, he does a great interview. And the Fed, again, this has been said over and over, but it's not federal and it has no reserves. The Federal Reserve, in essence, is a private institution that has zero accountability. It has zero oversight. We have numerous videos on our website, FTMDaily.com, of case in point of the Federal Reserve being in front of Congress and having zero answers to questions that we should expect as citizens to have from a central bank. If you're a bank and you want to make profits, do you want to lend to somebody like me or you, or do you want to lend to Walmart? I think you want to lend to Walmart because you're going to get a lot better return, and you're also going to get a guaranteed return almost.
A lot of assets to back it up.
Absolutely. Now, if you're a bank, do you want to lend to Walmart or do you want to lend to the United States government? Well, it all depends. Does that government have a federal income tax where the government can actually stick their hands into your pockets, pull money out by force, and then give it to the banksters? If they do, then the bank wants to lend to the government. So in 1913, they passed first a federal income tax. Then came the Federal Reserve Act, and that allowed then a guarantee to be made to the bank. Don't worry, we're going to borrow from you, and we'll pay you interest. And if we ever can't come up with the cash, cough it up, we have this income tax. We can always go extract from the people. So the Federal Reserve, in many ways, is unnecessary. It's a fraud. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says that the United States has the permission, the Congress has the express permission to coin money and regulate the value thereof. It never gives the Congress the ability to outsource that certainly, and certainly not to a private, autonomous banking system that is known for its corruption worldwide. The Federal Reserve has a lot to answer. Over $9 trillion has left our economy, has left their printing press to foreign banks. Part of the bailout that occurred back in 2008, 2009, there were all kinds of unbelievable reports coming out from the Congress and no answers. So the Federal Reserve is an absolute fraud and needs to be ended. And what you would have to do is you would have to basically take that back to Congress. Now, Congress doesn't want the Article 1, Section 8 because they realize that if they actually coin the money, well, if you coin money, what are you going to coin it out of? What did George Washington say? Gold and silver.
Yeah.
And he passed the Coinage Act of 1792. George Washington said this whenever he signed the bill. And the bill reads this way: if anyone ever creates paper money, ever, let him be hung. Hang him. It's death penalty. Currency Act of 1792. Well, now his picture, it graces the face of the $1 bill. So he would actually have hung somebody for making that dollar bill. And at the very top it says Federal Reserve Note. Now that should tip us off. It used to say silver certificate. Now it says Federal Reserve Note. If I say I have a car note, does that mean I have an asset? Maybe, but I certainly have a loan. So a car note means I have a car loan. If I have a Federal Reserve note in my pocket, it means I have a Federal Reserve loan. Here's the big secret that the Federal Reserve doesn't want you to know. They loan the dollars to the government. The government then puts those into circulation, and then we use them. But they all have to be paid back with interest to the Federal Reserve. Who creates the interest to be paid back?
The Federal Reserve. They set the rate, don't they?
No, the interest does not exist. This is why bankruptcies and foreclosures are built into the system. So if we say we need 10 million Federal Reserve notes, no problem. So we issue the bonds, and then we get the money from the Fed. The Fed gives us the money. Now, they say, no problem, we'll give it to you, and we're going to set our own rates, and we need you to pay us back 3%. Well, we've only got the amount of money they gave us. Where do we get the interest from? The interest does not exist.
That's where fractional reserve banking comes in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there is no interest to pay back. Therefore, you have to have foreclosures. You have to have bankruptcies. You have to have defaults because it's a game of musical chairs in this fractional reserve banking. There is not enough money in the system to pay off all the debt. And the Federal Reserve knows this, and the Congress knows this. At least some of them do. But, you'd be surprised because it was probably 20 or 30 years ago there was a survey done where congressmen were asked, is the dollar backed by gold? And, most of them thought that it was. And this, of course, was way after the fact that it wasn't. So I would say that many of our congressmen, many of them may be malicious, but I'm sure many of them are just ignorant.
Huh. And if we follow the money, the foreclosures, the bankruptcies, basically then put assets into the hands of the banks, does that indicate then that the privately owned banks that wind up holding on to these assets that people had to give up are the true beneficiaries of the Federal Reserve System?
Yeah, they're the owners of the Federal Reserve System. Yeah, they own the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
Now, there are 8 families, that many conspiracy theorists get into and talk about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. And there's no doubt. I mean, these guys own the banks. There's no doubt about it. But many people fail to realize that banks like Bank of America and J.P. Morgan and some of these others, they have a tremendous amount of ownership in the Federal Reserve. And their principals are benefiting from that. But you're right. It's a way of confiscating wealth. Because the defaults have to happen, it moves those right back to the bank. So it's a constant shell game where they're winning and the American public is losing.
So then doesn't it benefit the Federal Reserve and thus the bankers for the United States to continue to run a deficit and increase the deficit year after year after year?
Absolutely. Yeah, and how do they do this? They want war. This goes right back to what we started talking about. Central banks love war. Banks love war. Because if you have a government, you need them to borrow money. They need to be constantly needing money. Now think about the military-industrial complex you talked about earlier. These companies, defense contractors, which are the scum of the earth, absolutely positively the scum of the earth, they design weapons to kill people. Right? They're pretty bold about it. Mm-hmm. And it's like a hot dog stand. I mean, how many hot dogs do you make before you have to sell one? Right? You have to sell one eventually, don't you? And especially if you have a publicly traded stock. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got shareholders just saying, "Hey, how many bombs did you sell this quarter? So how many of your different gadgets and stuff did you sell?" So they have a constant pressure to sell these weapons. That's why we see the proliferation, more weapons on this planet now than ever before, and it's growing unbelievably. And of course they own the media. The corporations own the media, and there is no freedom of press in the United States except for the alternative media that we have, like WorldNet Daily and some of these other outfits. Who's Joseph Farah is here. Mm-hmm. These are the champions of our press today. We need to support alternative media, but back to the military-industrial complex. They make these bombs. They make these weapons. They have to be deployed. So the United States has to go out and drop bombs in the ocean for drill practice, or they've got to go drop them on a country, but they've got to use them because they have a shelf life. So it's a very perverse system. And what's so terrible is the fact that somehow, and I don't know how this happens, but somehow the Christians get co-opted into this whole system of believing that we need more war and believing that we don't need to have transparency in the Fed and believing that the banksters are not out to do us any harm. Some sort of mind game that occurs somehow. And so when the Christians are co-opted into it, that's when I get upset. Yeah, I expect the world to be deceived. But when the Christians themselves are pushing the agenda of the military-industrial complex and pushing the agenda of the banksters, somebody's got to realize that that's wrong.
Yeah, that's why dominion theology is one of the few things that really makes me angry. Because you're right. Jesus never told us we were to go forth and spread democracy to the ends of the earth. It was to go forth and preach the gospel to the ends of the earth. Jerry Robinson is the host of the 1 hour weekly radio program entitled Follow the Money Weekly, best-selling author of the book Bankruptcy of Our Nation, 21 Income Streams, Pace Investing, and More. I know we've only scratched the surface of the topics that you can touch on, but short of talking all night, we'll have to end it here. How do people find out more about your work, your writing, and your show?
Yeah, they can go to our website. They can just type in followthemoneydaily.com, FTMdaily.com. They can find us there. Over 1,000 articles there, tons, probably 3 years of archives of radio shows. But FTM Daily is the best place to go.
All right, Jerry Robinson, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to getting that newsletter, which I signed up for just before we went to air here tonight. From the Prophecy Summit at Pikes Peak, I'm Derek Gilbert.
Follow the Money Weekly presents your precious metals market update. Here's Tom Cloud.
I want to start off this by saying that today I'm going to go through some things, and I may be a little stronger than I normally am, but I have never seen gold and silver in 38 years at a better price ratio to world debt, the amount of money being printed, and there's just a huge gap between where gold and silver should be. Jerry did an outstanding job last week of giving you 5 reasons you should own gold, and that sometimes applies to gold and silver. But I want to go through today with 38 years experience in this business and just tell you what I see, because I appreciate the nice comments we get for providing this information. But today I was going to go through and tell you what I'm thinking. Number one, the Swiss referendum failed over the weekend. and as soon as it failed, prices actually went up 2.5% in gold as prices went down on Friday, anticipating it wouldn't pass, and it didn't pass. But now we're seeing gold and silver soar as the week starts, and already back over what it was on Friday. So the referendum really did not, it meant a lot for constitutional money long term, but on the short term, with the way the shorts and everything are backed up, there was just no way it was going to have a major effect just right overnight. It probably would have bounced a little bit higher. So let's get that out of the way. Let's get into what's happening that are way out of whack compared to what they normally are. First of all, lease rates are soaring on gold over 3 times this year. You could lease your gold. Of course, if you did, you would probably never get it back based on what we're seeing with everybody wanting to repatriate their gold and bring it back home. And certainly Switzerland does want to do that, even though the referendum to back their currency with gold failed. So now we're seeing a lot of panic in the lease rates where they're trying to give them more money to turn their gold over to them, where they can fill orders on people like Germany that are screaming for their money. This is a huge indicator that gold's going to go a lot higher in 2015. The next thing I'm watching very closely is the dollar. We follow that a lot on Jerry's show, and we know that the dollar has hit 88, and some experts are saying it could go as high as 92 on the world index, which would be another 5%. If it does, it will kill the U.S. economy. We can't sell anything abroad if the dollar strengthens anymore, as our exports have already started having 2 terrible months in a row, our deficit, trade deficit. So now it's only going to get worse if the dollar goes higher. So whether it goes another 3, 4, 5% higher, I can't tell you, but I can tell you the dollar is grossly overpriced, and we're seeing the English currency, the British pound, also move up substantially and actually moving up much quicker than the dollar, and we'll continue to see that, and also in the euro as we go into 2015. We always know when the dollar goes down, silver and gold goes up. The biggest announcement over the holiday weekend is from the World Geological Survey, saying they first thought silver would run out between 2018 and 2020. They're now saying 2020, at the current rate that silver is being used, will be completely mined out of the Earth's crust, and there'll be no more silver, and for all the applications that it needs. So even if you bought silver and sat on it for 5 years, and we're talking about returns that I really feel you're not going to be able to comprehend. We're not talking about 2008 where silver went from $9 to $45, went up 5 times. We're talking about a potential, and yes, some of these crazy numbers you see out there at $150 to $200, $250 an ounce are realistic when you consider the world cannot live without silver. The other thing to remember right now is industrial silver. About 70% of all the silver in the world is still going to industrial uses. So we've only got about 30% of it going to investors, and as investors pick up over the next 2-3 years, you're going to see huge shortfalls in silver. Here we are at the end of 2014, and every silver wholesaler we deal with is delayed. And we're buying from a few wholesalers that have live goods, but the ones that are manufacturing the products are all in delay. And if anybody thinks it's going to get better, you're mistaken. It's going to get worse and worse, and premiums are going to go higher and higher. The next thing I want to talk about are the ratio. As I record this, gold is 74.4 times higher than silver. And there's no question that this ratio will go back to 50 to 1 and probably during 2015. So if you look at that, silver has very little downside risk from the $16 range it's in right now, especially with the mining cost being in the low 19s. So it's about $3 below mining cost. And as I said last week, silver and gold, when the gold below mining cost in my 38 years, 5 months is the longest I've seen it stay below mining cost. So we're already 1 month into it. So So I still expect silver to be over $19 by the end of the first quarter of 2015, which would be a very nice 20% profit for our listeners to get in there and get it all while the ratio is this big and it's below mining cost. The next item is the world-renowned stalker, the most famous gold and silver trader in the world, told Bill last week on La Metropole Cafe that we were going to see, he was going to move all into silver when it got to 1680. So we're about 70, 80 cents away from seeing the world's biggest trader go long. His trades have been documented by Bill Murphy on the Metropole Cafe, a gold and silver website, since he met him in 2003, and where we're up about, gold's up about 4.5 times, and silver about 4 times since 2003. He's up something like 16 times because he moves in and out of these metals. And he is 75% in gold, but currently he's not any in silver. So when silver crosses over 1680, then you should see silver rise to 19 very quickly. And, you know, if you want to watch it carefully and follow the stalker, you can watch it. As it gets closer to 1680, you can make your purchase. The other thing that is very interesting in the world of gold and silver is oil prices and this huge price war we've seen bring the prices down to the $75 per barrel range. We're now seeing two major economists, Mr. Rosen and Stephen Lieb, over the weekend forecast oil is over $120 a barrel, but one of them said over 110, one said over 120 a barrel during 2015. So if that happens, of course, we're reinflating. We know inflation's going to show up soon due to all the money being printed in Japan and Europe and the United States. So this oil price situation will reinflate the economy with oil prices soaring, gasoline prices going up, metal prices going up, the dollar going down. So there's everybody I'm reading out there is expecting a much higher inflation rate in 2015. The next item is the Shanghai Exchange that opened on September 18th that has performed beyond anything any of us thought possible, as they now have a shortfall in delivering their gold and silver over there, which is causing a shortfall at all the major refineries around the world because they're selling COMEX products and Royal Canadian Mint products and very highly traded liquid products. And we're seeing an article today on King World News and also on USA Watchdog with Greg Hunter that the premiums over there now are like 50% over for people that want direct immediate delivery. There are people that will free it up, and people are actually paying 50% over the spot price to buy both gold and silver because they don't think the gold and silver the supplies will get so short. They want to be sure they have it in their hands, plus they're afraid of currencies going under, which leads me to my next. For the ones that haven't followed it, in a story out 3 weeks ago about Romania has taken their citizens' 401ks and put them into government bonds. We're now seeing that this is being looked at in several countries, including Spain and Portugal and Ireland, to where they have to have people buy their bonds, and their citizens are not buying them, and world investors are not buying them. So now we're seeing what's happened in Argentina and Brazil going to happen, where they actually just take your 401k and put it into government bonds and pay you a very low rate and don't allow you to invest it where you want to. The good news is that the Indian taxes, after a year of very high taxes and gold being smuggled in, the government has finally thrown the taxes back, which will increase demand dramatically in 2015 for India. India is still the largest purchaser of gold, and of course a lot of that's done in late August through October as the crops come in and they pay their bills and invest the difference in gold. And they're investing a lot more in silver today, too. So we're going to watch that as a very, very big plus for metals for 2015. And then the last item is this morning, or on Monday morning, the Moody's announced they downgraded Japan's debt. Of course, we've already had our debt downgraded once, and we're not in trouble of having our debt downgraded tomorrow, the next day, or next month, but we're next because everything's being set up in Russia and China to get out of the U.S. dollar, petrodollar that Jerry's been on for several years. Keep giving y'all a huge heads up, your listeners, to get way ahead of the curve, and now we're seeing all this come true. And certainly, it's the opinion of top experts, including economists of a Wall Street firm I talked to this morning, calling me that I've known for many years, and he thinks that we'll definitely have a downgrade in U.S. debt and a very poor year for bonds in 2015. So this is all very positive for our business. I know things have taken longer than I thought and a lot of other people have, but what I do know from 38 years of doing this, they're not mistakes. You're still going to be so far ahead of the game if you're not looking at it short term, owning metals, because this is a huge move that's getting ready to come. It's going to start in 2015 and carry all the way through 2020, in my opinion, and there are going to be governments going under, debt defaulted all over the world, and we're moving into some very serious times. And then lastly, if anybody needs to reach me, you can call me at 800-247-2812. That's 800-247-2812. If you're not on our email blast, you can sign up for that at FTMDaily.com and go to the precious metals page or /gold and sign up. We don't share your emails with anybody. Your email address is completely confidential. If you find you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe, but we try to keep you updated with what's going on in the market. If any of you need to talk to us about a self-directed precious metals IRA, we'll be happy to walk you through how you can have gold and silver, physical gold and silver in your IRA. And then lastly, for those still holding rare coins, I think your time is very short to get out of those. And as I mentioned last week, they haven't even gone up 70% in 14 years, while gold's gone from $250 to $1,200 during the same time frame. And it's only going to get worse, in my opinion, because even the collectors have just moved out of the rare coin business. With this week's Precious Metals Market Update, this is Tom Cloud signing out.
Well, friends, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for choosing to allow us into your life each and every Tuesday right here on Follow the Money Weekly. And as always, I leave you with this final word, this time spoken by Sir John Templeton, when he said, "The four most expensive words in the English language are 'this time it's different.'" Just something to think about. Remember, friends, when you want the truth about the global economy, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and we'll see you right back here next Tuesday. Until then, God bless.
All of the information contained on Follow the Money is strictly for informational and educational purposes. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors, including Tom Cloud and Jay Peroni, are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of FTMDaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry and Jennifer Robinson do hold their insurance licenses and may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Jennifer Robinson is an investment advisor representative with Faith-Based Investor, LLC. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always